Beloved one. There is something you felt long before it was ever spoken out loud. A quiet discomfort. A strange resistance that appeared whenever you began moving forward. You noticed how certain moments of progress were followed by sudden confusion, subtle discouragement, or quiet tension in rooms where there used to be peace. At first you questioned yourself. You wondered if you were imagining things, if maybe you were simply overthinking the situation. But deep within your spirit there was a whisper that refused to go silent. Something was not random. And now, little by little, heaven is allowing you to understand why. Because the resistance you experienced was never simply about circumstances. It was connected to people who misread you, misunderstood your calling, and quietly miscalculated who you truly are. They looked at your kindness and assumed weakness. They watched your patience and mistook it for passivity. They noticed your quiet focus and assumed you were unaware of the undercurrents moving around you. But what they failed to realize is that stillness is not blindness. Many of the obstacles that appeared in your life were not accidents. They were the result of hidden insecurity operating behind familiar faces. Modern behavioral psychology has repeatedly observed that nearly 70% of personal sabotage originates from people within one's own relational circle. Coworkers, acquaintances, even individuals who once appeared supportive. Not because they were born malicious, but because comparison quietly awakened something unsettled inside them. You carried a peace they could not explain. You walked with a direction they could not control. And for some hearts, witnessing someone move forward awakens a silent fear of being left behind. So the resistance began subtly. A dismissive comment here. A quiet rumor there. A moment where someone downplayed your success or questioned your intentions in a way that seemed harmless on the surface. But patterns reveal more than isolated moments. Maybe it was the coworker who smiled during meetings yet slowly minimized your contributions when others were listening. Or perhaps it was a familiar voice who appeared supportive in private conversations but quietly introduced doubt when your name entered other rooms. Sometimes sabotage doesn't look like open hostility. Sometimes it hides inside politeness, disguised as concern, wrapped in subtle suggestions that slowly reshape how others perceive you. And the truth is, for a time, they believed it was working. They believed their quiet interference would remain hidden. But heaven has a way of revealing what human strategy tries to conceal. Long before this moment, a principle was spoken that still echoes through time. Luke 8 verse 17. For nothing is hidden that will not be disclosed, nor anything concealed that will not be known and brought out into the open. This is not simply a warning. It is a law woven into the fabric of reality itself. Truth has gravity. It eventually rises to the surface, no matter how carefully it was buried. Masks can remain in place for a season, but they cannot survive the pressure of time forever. And that is exactly what has begun happening around you. Small inconsistencies are starting to appear in places where perfect control once seemed possible. People who once accepted certain narratives without question are beginning to notice subtle contradictions. Conversations are shifting. Observations are being made quietly. Not loudly, not dramatically, but steadily. You may not even realize how many eyes have been watching the entire situation unfold. Because while some individuals were busy calculating how to undermine you, others were silently observing the difference between character and performance. They noticed the calm way you handled pressure. They noticed that you continued showing integrity even when recognition was delayed. They noticed that you refused to engage in the same tactics that were quietly being used against you. And those observations matter more than you realize. In human dynamics, authenticity has a way of revealing itself over time. Studies in social behavior consistently show that people who attempt long-term manipulation eventually expose themselves through patterns of inconsistency. It becomes increasingly difficult to maintain a false narrative when reality keeps contradicting it. That is why heaven never needed you to fight every hidden battle yourself. Your role was not to chase every whisper or defend yourself against every subtle attack. Your role was to remain aligned with who you truly are, while truth quietly gathered its own witnesses. And now, without dramatic announcements or loud confrontations, something remarkable is beginning to happen. The atmosphere around your story is shifting. People are starting to sense that the picture they were shown about you was incomplete. Some are remembering moments where your actions did not match the rumors they heard. Others are recalling situations where your integrity quietly spoke louder than accusations ever could. This is how revelation begins. Not through sudden explosions, but through gradual illumination. Light doesn't shout when it enters a room. It simply reveals what was already there. And right now, that light is slowly touching places that were once carefully hidden. The individuals who thought they had full control over the narrative are beginning to realize that control is slipping from their hands. The strategies that once seemed clever are starting to feel unstable. The quiet confidence they once had in their secrecy is being replaced with something far more uncomfortable. Uncertainty. Because deep inside, they are beginning to sense that the story is no longer unfolding the way they planned. What they never anticipated was that heaven was not ignoring what was happening. Every moment of quiet integrity you carried, every time you chose patience over retaliation, every time you continued walking forward without becoming bitter, those moments were being recorded in ways that human perception could not immediately see. Truth was building momentum. And when truth begins to move, masks start losing their power. The most surprising part is that this exposure will not happen through your voice alone. It will happen through timing, through patterns, through observations made by people who were never directly involved. It will happen through moments where someone finally connects pieces that once seemed unrelated. And when those realizations begin to settle into place, something inevitable follows. Because the moment heaven begins revealing the truth, the first mask quietly starts falling. But what happens next will surprise even you, beloved one. Now that the first layer of truth has begun surfacing, something even more revealing is unfolding. The resistance you faced was never just about stopping your progress. It was revealing something deeper, something psychological that many people never recognize until it is too late. Because when someone spends energy trying to quietly undermine another person, their actions begin exposing more about their own inner condition than the person they are targeting. And that is exactly what happened in your situation. What looked like an attack against you slowly became a mirror exposing them. Psychologists describe a common behavioral pattern called projection. It occurs when someone carries insecurities or internal conflicts they cannot face within themselves, so they unconsciously assign those qualities to another person. Instead of admitting their own fear, jealousy, or uncertainty, they accuse someone else of being the problem. It allows them to protect their self-image while quietly shifting attention away from what they do not want to confront. But projection has a flaw. It leaves fingerprints. The more someone projects, the more their words begin contradicting their own behavior. The person spreading doubt eventually reveals the very traits they are trying to assign to someone else. And this is where heaven's wisdom begins to operate through patterns rather than confrontation. Many people who worked against you were not motivated by hatred. Their deeper struggle was comparison anxiety. Research in social psychology repeatedly shows that people often sabotage individuals who unintentionally trigger feelings of inadequacy within them. When someone carries clarity, discipline, or inner peace that others have not yet cultivated, it can create an uncomfortable mirror. Instead of asking, "How can I grow?" some individuals quietly ask, "How can I bring them down to my level?" And that is where subtle attacks begin. Maybe someone started circulating a small rumor about your intentions. Nothing dramatic, nothing obviously malicious, just enough uncertainty to make others question your motives. Perhaps someone distorted a conversation or shared a partial story that removed the context which would have made you look honorable. Sometimes manipulation is not loud, sometimes it is whispered carefully in environments where the targeted person is not present to clarify the truth. Reputation attacks often begin exactly this way. At first, it appears effective. People hear the story. A few doubts appear. The narrative shifts slightly. But manipulation is like trying to hold water in closed hands. The tighter someone tries to control perception, the more pressure builds around inconsistencies. Because lies require maintenance. Truth simply exists. And over time, the person spreading confusion begins struggling to keep every version of their story aligned. Different conversations reveal slightly different details. A claim made confidently one week quietly changes the next. Observant people start noticing that the accusations against you never quite match the evidence of how you actually behave. Your consistency became the contrast. You continued showing up with integrity. You remained calm when situations could have easily provoked retaliation. You did not chase every rumor or confront every whisper. Instead, you allowed your actions to speak over time. And that is when an ancient principle quietly began unfolding. Proverbs 26 verse 27. Whoever digs a pit will fall into it. This wisdom is not merely poetic language. It reflects a pattern visible throughout human behavior. When someone constructs a strategy designed to trap another person, they must eventually walk close enough to that trap to maintain it. They must continue feeding the narrative, reinforcing the suspicion, repeating the story in new environments. But every repetition increases the chances of exposure. Every manipulation adds another thread to the web of contradiction. Sooner or later, someone notices something that does not align. Maybe a colleague remembers a conversation that directly conflicts with the rumor. Maybe a friend recalls how you acted in a situation where you had nothing to gain by doing the right thing. Maybe someone quietly realizes that the person spreading the accusation seems strangely invested in your downfall. And when that realization begins forming, the energy shifts. The narrative loses stability. Suddenly the person who once controlled the story starts becoming defensive. Their explanations become longer, more complicated, harder to maintain. Instead of clarity, there is confusion. Instead of confidence, there is subtle anxiety beneath their voice. Because deep inside they begin sensing something uncomfortable. The pit they dug is no longer pointing toward you. It is opening beneath their own feet. And here is the truth many people never understand until this moment arrives. When someone spends months trying to weaken another person's reputation, they slowly reveal their own character to everyone watching carefully. The very behavior they used as a weapon becomes evidence of who they are. Manipulation exposes manipulation. Envy exposes envy. Insecurity exposes insecurity. Without realizing it, their attack became their confession. That is why heaven never rushed the process. Exposure requires timing. If the truth appears too early, people dismiss it as conflict. But when patterns unfold naturally over time, observers begin connecting the pieces themselves. And once people reach their own conclusions, the realization becomes far more powerful than anything you could have argued. Because now the truth does not sound like defense. It sounds like discovery. The individuals who once believed they were controlling the narrative are starting to notice something unsettling. The room no longer responds to them the same way. Conversations that once supported their perspective now carry hesitation. Certain people are watching them more carefully. They thought their strategy was invisible. They believed their subtle influence would remain unquestioned. But heaven sees what human eyes often miss. Every whisper. Every intention. Every quiet calculation. And when the moment for revelation arrives, even the most carefully constructed illusion begins to crack. Because the truth was never asleep. It was simply waiting. Waiting for the right moment when the pattern would become undeniable, when observers would start asking questions, when the person who tried to bury another would realize the ground beneath them was never stable. They thought they were hiding. But heaven was watching every move. Beloved one, once deception begins exposing itself, something else quietly activates, something many people overlook until it unfolds right in front of them. It is the moment when the energy someone sends outward begins circling back toward them. Not through revenge. Not through dramatic confrontation. But through a natural reversal that occurs when truth and time begin working together. You may have already noticed the early signs. At first, the manipulation seemed stable. The whispers about you moved quietly through certain conversations. The person who initiated the narrative appeared confident that their influence would continue shaping how others perceived you. For a while, it even looked convincing. But manipulation has a weakness: it cannot survive prolonged observation. Every rumor eventually reaches someone who knows you well enough to feel something is wrong. Every distorted story eventually touches a person who has seen your character in moments when no audience was watching. And when those moments of contradiction begin accumulating, the illusion starts losing strength. Social psychology reveals an interesting threshold in group dynamics. Researchers have found that when roughly 30 to 40% of a social circle begin sensing deception or inconsistency, the reputation of the manipulator begins collapsing much faster than it was built. Once a small portion of observers starts questioning the narrative, doubt spreads quickly through quiet conversations. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But steadily. People begin comparing notes. One person remembers a moment where your integrity was undeniable. Another recalls a situation where the accusation they heard simply did not match your actions. Someone else notices that the person spreading the rumors seems unusually invested in controlling the narrative. And slowly, the tide begins turning. What once sounded convincing now sounds exaggerated. What once felt believable now feels strangely forced. And the individuals who once accepted the story without question start looking at the situation through a different lens. This is the moment when the energy begins reversing. Because every action carries consequences that extend far beyond the moment it was created. Long ago, a simple truth was spoken that explains this exact pattern. Galatians 6 verse 7. Whatever one sows, that will he also reap. This principle is not limited to agriculture or morality. It operates through human relationships, reputation, and influence. The intentions people plant through their actions eventually grow into visible results. Seeds of honesty produce trust. Seeds of manipulation produce suspicion. The individuals who tried to damage your reputation believed they were planting doubt in other people's minds. But what they unknowingly planted was a pattern of behavior that others would eventually recognize. And now that pattern is beginning to grow. Maybe someone who once believed the rumors is now remembering how calm you remained during moments of pressure. Maybe a colleague is starting to question why certain accusations were always delivered when you were not present to respond. Maybe a friend is quietly realizing that your actions consistently reflected integrity while the stories about you never quite matched reality. These realizations rarely arrive with loud announcements. They appear through quiet shifts. Someone stops repeating the rumor. Another person becomes more distant from the one who spread it. A conversation changes direction when your name enters the room. Little by little, alliances begin adjusting. People who once stood neutrally on the sidelines start leaning toward truth. Observers who once avoided involvement now feel compelled to reconsider what they witnessed. And those who originally carried the narrative forward begin recognizing that something about it no longer feels trustworthy. This is how reputations restore themselves. Not through force, but through consistency. Your refusal to engage in the same tactics used against you became one of the strongest forms of evidence anyone could observe. While others attempted to control perception through whispers, you continued living in a way that quietly contradicted their claims. Integrity creates a contrast that manipulation cannot imitate. And eventually, that contrast becomes impossible to ignore. Now imagine the position of the person who started the entire scheme. The same people who once listened carefully to their words are beginning to listen differently. Questions are appearing where agreement once existed. Conversations are becoming shorter. Confidence in their story is fading. The room feels different now. Because the narrative is no longer under their control. In fact, the rumors they released into the world are beginning to travel back toward them in unexpected ways. Someone mentions the story in a new environment, and suddenly another voice responds with doubt. Someone else recalls a situation that contradicts the accusation. Another observer shares an experience that reveals your true character. And with every conversation like this, the truth gains momentum. This is the moment when the law of sowing and reaping becomes visible in real time. What they planted is returning. Not because you demanded justice. Not because you forced exposure. But because truth has a way of gathering witnesses when patience allows it to breathe. The same voices that once carried suspicion are now carrying questions. And something even more remarkable is beginning to happen. The individuals who once stood uncertain about you are starting to notice the pattern clearly. Some of them feel a quiet sense of regret for believing the narrative too quickly. Others are realizing that your silence during the attacks was not weakness, it was discipline. They are seeing you differently now. Your calmness under pressure has become evidence. Your refusal to retaliate has become credibility. Your consistency has become the foundation that the truth can stand on. And that realization changes everything. Because once people begin recognizing the difference between manipulation and authenticity, the illusion loses its final layer of protection. The same environment that once amplified doubt now begins amplifying clarity. But the most surprising shift has not even happened yet. Because as the truth spreads quietly through the circle that once questioned you, something unexpected begins unfolding. People who once doubted you are starting to change. Beloved one. By now, you may be noticing something that even the people who opposed you are beginning to realize. The reason their efforts never fully succeeded was not because they lacked strategy. It was because they were trying to fight someone who was operating on a completely different level. Not a level of status. Not a level of power. But a level of awareness. While some people navigate life through reaction and impulse, you learn something far more powerful: emotional regulation. When pressure appeared, you did not rush to defend your ego. When rumors spread, you did not rush to mirror the same tactics. When tension entered the room, you remained calm enough to observe before responding. To many people, that calmness looked strange. Some interpreted it as weakness. Others assumed it meant you were unaware of what was happening around you. But what they misunderstood was that stillness is often a sign of strength that has already mastered its own impulses. Psychologists who study conflict resolution consistently observe a powerful pattern. Individuals who maintain emotional regulation during social conflict almost always prevail over time. Not because they are louder or more aggressive, but because calm clarity exposes manipulation more effectively than reaction ever could. When someone reacts emotionally to every attack, the situation becomes chaotic and confusing. But when one person remains steady while others become increasingly agitated, observers begin recognizing where the real imbalance exists. And that is exactly what happened in your story. While others tried controlling perception through whispers and strategies, you continued walking with quiet authority. You did not allow their behavior to reshape your character. You did not adopt bitterness just because others chose dishonesty. Instead, you stayed aligned with your purpose. This is where the spiritual dimension becomes undeniable. Because long before these events ever unfolded, there was already a promise spoken over those who walk with integrity. A declaration that explains why certain attacks seem powerful at first but ultimately lose their influence. Isaiah 54 verse 17. No weapon formed against you shall prosper. Many people misunderstand this promise. They think it means that weapons will never be formed. But the truth is different. The verse acknowledges that weapons will appear. Strategies will be created. Opposition will arise. The difference is what happens next. Those weapons never achieve their intended result. Because when someone walks in alignment with a calling larger than human approval, opposition begins losing its ability to control the outcome. What was designed to damage reputation begins revealing character. What was intended to block progress becomes the very situation that proves resilience. In other words, the weapon still forms. But it fails. And sometimes, something even more remarkable happens. The very thing meant to weaken you becomes the reason your strength becomes visible to everyone else. Think about it carefully. If the rumors had never spread, many people might never have witnessed how calmly you handled adversity. If the manipulation had never appeared, observers might never have seen the contrast between your integrity and someone else's insecurity. Their attack created the stage where your character became undeniable. What they thought was sabotage became demonstration. This is the moment where the entire story begins flipping in a way they never anticipated. Because the more they attempted to restrict your influence, the more clearly your stability began standing out. People began noticing how you refused to engage in unnecessary drama. They saw how you continued treating others with respect even while facing quiet hostility. They observed how your focus remained on growth rather than revenge. And that observation created something powerful. Respect. Not the loud type of respect that demands attention, but the quiet type that grows in the minds of observers who recognize authenticity when they see it. The same individuals who once watched the situation with uncertainty are now seeing a completely different picture. They are realizing that your peace was not accidental. It came from a deeper awareness. A spiritual alignment that others could not disrupt simply through strategy. Because when someone is grounded in purpose rather than ego, manipulation loses its greatest weapon, emotional reaction. Without reaction, the drama they expected never appears. Without drama, their narrative has nothing to feed on. And that is why their efforts slowly began collapsing. The very situation they created to weaken you started elevating you instead. What they meant as a trap revealed your stability. What they meant as doubt revealed your consistency. What they meant as pressure revealed your patience. the weapon turned into something entirely different. A ladder. Every attempt to lower your reputation only highlighted your integrity. Every whisper meant to isolate you eventually revealed who was acting with honesty and who was not. Every moment of quiet pressure became another opportunity for your character to rise above the noise. And as this transformation becomes visible, something begins happening inside the hearts of those who once opposed you. Because when someone realizes that their efforts only strengthened the very person they tried to weaken, a difficult emotion begins forming. Recognition. They start understanding that the calmness they once mocked was actually discipline. The patience they misunderstood was actually wisdom. The silence they interpreted as weakness was actually control. And the moment that realization settles into their mind, that is when regret quietly begins. Beloved one. Every story that passes through betrayal eventually reaches a moment of clarity. Not just for the one who endured the attack, but also for the ones who initiated it. And in many cases, that clarity arrives far later than anyone expects. Because realization rarely appears during the moment of conflict. It appears afterward. It appears when the noise fades, when emotions settle, and when people begin seeing the full picture of what truly happened. That is the stage where one of the most powerful human emotions begins to surface: regret. The individuals who once worked quietly against you are beginning to notice something unsettling. The influence they thought they gained has slowly dissolved. The narrative they tried controlling no longer carries the same weight. And the person they attempted to weaken is still standing, still moving forward, still growing in ways they never anticipated. That realization is difficult to face. Psychologists who study human regret often observe a pattern that appears repeatedly in relational conflicts. Regret intensifies when people realize they sabotaged someone who was actually supportive or beneficial to their own life. In other words, the pain is not only about what they did, it is about what they lost. And this is where the deeper truth of your situation begins revealing itself. You were never their threat. You were their opportunity. Your presence in their life carried the potential for growth, collaboration, and shared success. Your character created an environment where trust could have flourished. Your direction could have inspired progress in people who chose to learn from it. But insecurity blinded them. Instead of recognizing the blessing placed near them, they misinterpreted it as competition. Instead of walking beside you, they attempted to step in front of you. Instead of supporting what heaven was building in your life, they tried interfering with it. And now they are beginning to see the cost of that decision. Because while they were busy managing rumors and strategies, you continued walking toward your purpose. While they were trying to control perception, you were building something far more durable: character, resilience, wisdom. Those qualities do not disappear with time. They grow. And now the contrast between your path and theirs is becoming impossible to ignore. The chaos they created has faded into the background, while the peace you carried continues expanding. The story they tried to write about you has quietly collapsed under the weight of truth. This is where the deeper spiritual reality becomes visible. Long ago, a declaration was spoken by someone who had also experienced betrayal from people close to him. A statement that reveals how opposition can be transformed into something entirely different. Genesis 50 verse 20. You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. This verse does not deny the existence of harmful intentions. It acknowledges them directly. Yes, there were people who acted from envy, insecurity, or fear. Yes, there were moments when their actions caused confusion and pain. But the verse reveals something even greater. Their intention was never the final authority over your story. While they were planning interference, heaven was designing transformation. While they attempted to create obstacles, something larger was quietly reshaping those obstacles into stepping stones. Every challenge you endured refined your awareness, strengthened your patience, and deepened your understanding of human nature. What they meant to limit you became preparation for your elevation. And that is the moment when the full picture becomes undeniable. Because the people who once doubted you are now seeing a version of you that carries more clarity than before. The struggles that once looked like setbacks have become evidence of resilience. Your peace has become proof. Proof that bitterness did not take control of your heart. Proof that your identity was never dependent on public approval. Proof that truth eventually stands on its own, even when it walks through seasons of misunderstanding. And this proof is something no rumor can erase. The people who once misjudged you are now forced to reconsider everything they believed. Some of them will quietly acknowledge the mistake within themselves. Others may never admit it openly, but deep inside they will know the truth. They misread you. They miscalculated your strength. And most importantly, they misunderstood your role in their own lives. Because you were never meant to be their opponent. You were meant to be a blessing that crossed their path. But destiny does not stop simply because someone failed to recognize it. The road continues moving forward. Opportunities shift. Access changes. And sometimes the distance between two paths becomes permanent. Not out of revenge, but out of growth. The chapter where their influence once existed has already begun closing. And as it closes, another chapter opens, one where your focus is no longer on what was lost, but on what was revealed. Your story did not end in chaos. It rose above it. Long after the whispers fade and the rumors disappear, something much stronger will remain. The memory of how you carried yourself during adversity. The quiet strength that allowed truth to surface without desperation. The example you unknowingly set for others who watched the situation unfold. That is what legacy looks like. It is not built through arguments or public victories. It is built through character that remains steady even when circumstances become uncertain. It is built through patience that allows time to reveal what manipulation tries to hide. And in the end, that legacy outlives every moment of chaos that once surrounded it. The truth becomes visible. The peace becomes undeniable. And the story continues moving forward in a direction far greater than anyone who tried to stop it could have imagined. So if this message found you at the exact moment your spirit needed to hear it, make sure it reaches someone else who may need the same reminder. Because sometimes the greatest confirmation that heaven is working in someone's life is the simple fact that truth keeps rising, no matter how deeply others try to bury it.